can you talk to us more about generative AI in the application of workforce development?
Yeah, so like I talked about the last time I was on, there's this theory called diffusion of innovation, where basically half of all people pick up new tools immediately and use them. And then there's another half that waits until super late, if at all. And that's a problem because skilled use of things like ChatGPT can help users get a leg up on their non-user competition. So we already know from the gray literature or the unpublished literature that there is an effect of generative AI on business productivity that's pretty huge. There's two authors, Noi and Zhang, 2023, assigned a writing task to a bunch of workers and then split the people into two groups using ChatGPT or not using ChatGPT. People who use ChatGPT spent an average of 10 minutes less for a task that took non-users 30 minutes. So not only was this work faster output, but it was higher quality output. So if this generalizes to all writing tasks, that means that you could save up to 160 minutes a day if you were just writing all day long. That's time that can be reclaimed to think, study, create, produce. In other words, make an impression on your employer and build out your portfolio. So my ultimate goal is to turn that half of non-users into users so that they can benefit from these tools. But there is one important caveat. The gray literature, like I mentioned above, is not published literature, meaning it's not peer-reviewed. So you got to ask the questions like, is this measure generalizable? Did they introduce any bias? These are very important questions that peers would ask before we decided that ChatGPT is definitively better for productivity. But at face value, it intuitively makes sense that using a tool will help you get the job done faster and better if it's the right tool for the job.
I like hearing that, and the distinction in the peer review versus not peer reviewed, and when we are looking at article research that isn't peer reviewed, what are the things that we have to look at more stringently, and like the methods, and what are the kind of biases that they could have introduced into the work. And I could imagine that ChatGPT is something that a lot more students, people in the workforce, are actually using to support them in doing their work. I know that I've definitely been using it a lot more and trying to get better at using it in just being able to help with my productivity and maybe like just brainstorming a lot of things like this. So people who mightn't have not used it as yet, what kinds of ways would you tell them to get involved or to learn about ChatGPT and how they can use it?
Yeah, there's a ton of ways. At the end of the podcast, I'm going to name off a couple YouTubers that I think are pretty influential and important. But really just thinking about using it, just trying it. You have to start with say hi, say how are you, and go from there. You could use ChatGPT, Gemini, which is produced by Google, or Claude, which is produced by, I think, like Anthropology or something like that. I think that's a clothing store, but it's close to that. But it's a dialogue, and that's what is very important to understand. And it's something that my wife says that most people that she talks to don't ever get, is that once you say hi, you can then say, how are you? And then you can say, well, actually, I want to talk to you about the missile crisis in such and such place, and completely switch it and have a conversation about that topic, and just explore.
Absolutely. And I know most recently I used it to create a title and objectives, or like to help me clarify a title and objectives for a presentation that I'll be doing. And of course, like I adjusted words and did things, but it really did create like and it created too much information at first, actually, but it gave me a better idea of what I needed to include and how I can use this to like create more. And of course, this wasn't the last product that I used. I definitely edited it and went online and looked at other resources to see like what are the specific words that I should be using to cater to public health, to the type of audience that I was working with. But to that point, it is something that is very, very helpful. And one of the things that I always do is like, okay, this is what I want you to do. ask me 5 questions like to help
Yeah.
you clarify, to better support me, and like really getting deep and granular on those things, and it gives you a lot richer information in that way and more specific to whatever task you have at hand.
Yeah, and you can literally tell it you are a public health researcher, and that will help it get the context to have it then use more public health related words. And then you can say, be succinct, and it'll start producing less information. But your little hack that you just said is my favorite by far, is to tell it to ask you questions until it's satisfied that it has enough information to produce a high quality whatever it is that you're trying to make.
Absolutely. And I know that we could talk about this for a very long time, and maybe we'll try to figure out a way to just talk about ChatGPT or AI in public health in another conversation